it on their phone without them knowing? Absolutely not. We tell our kids, yeah, I'm going to check in on you. And it's great for them because it helps them make better decisions. If they go someplace and they think they're going to sneak to another place, but they know mom and dad might check in on Life 360, it might just be sort of that yellow light to kind of slow down and think and make a better choice. Should I let them know I'm leaving? Do I really need to leave? Those kinds of things. Make an agreement. So, what does that mean, especially with COVID, in terms of um, you can have sleepovers. We're back to having sleepovers. We're comfortable with that. But what if there's a younger sibling who's not vaccinated? What if there's someone at your friend's house who has a pre-existing medical condition or something else? I certainly don't want to get into the vaccine discussion because that's a whole different out of my scope. But having those discussions with your kids and making an agreement of this is what our family is comfortable with and why, and not sort of just like dictating, no, you can't, but giving them a logical reason and helping them understand the decision-making process. Because again, our end goal is raising independent thinkers who are capable of making safe and healthy decisions for themselves. So if we just say, no, can't go, it's not a good idea, they're never going to learn that. And the third thing I have on here with navigating the choppy water is be available. So teens in general are not great at coming to mom and dad and saying, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here are my thoughts and feelings. They tend to sort of either share them with their friends or not share them at all. And also, teens also have dreadful timing. So I know in my house, my kids, a lot of times it's in the car, but most often when they come to me, either they want me to edit a paper or they want to tell me about something that happened with a friend or something that's bothering them. It's at like 10:30 at night when I still have a handful of emails. I want to unload the dishwasher. I want to fold the laundry and my brain is done. But when a teen comes to you and says like, hey, can I talk? Or they kind of come and they're sort of lurking around you and you get the sense something's going on, it's critical as parents that we put pause on everything else, make eye contact, and with our nonverbals, let them know, hey, we're here, I'm listening. There's nothing more important right now than what you have to say. And most of the time, that's where you're going to get the, hey, I'm really struggling. And sometimes it could just be like, I have this huge final, I have no idea where to even start. And sometimes it's, hey, this is going on with a friend and I don't know how to navigate it. And so really being available is critical. So after Rabbi Sorokin's session a week and a half or so ago, there were some questions that came in through the chat. And there was a lot of questions about how to help kids who really struggled socially even before the pandemic and sort of got that break. How do we help them sort of be more social or be more comfortable being social now that more activities are back and happening on a regular basis? So I'll tell you a story about one of our clients and the way that we sort of navigated it is the 14-year-old girl, and her mom noticed, on Instagram and through talking to other parents that it seemed like a lot of kids were really starting to get together again, and her daughter hadn't had plans in weeks and weeks and weeks. And so she went ahead and bought a few tickets to the zoo and said to her daughter, hey, why don't you invite so-and-so and so-and-so, and it's going to be a nice Sunday, I'll take you guys to the zoo, you'll walk around, you'll get ice cream. And she's 14, she looked at her, she was like, Mom, that's the weirdest thing ever, I'm not doing that. And then texted a friend, one of the friends the mom had suggested, and was like, ew, my mom's so weird, she told me to invite you to the zoo. And the friend was like, actually, that sounds fun, I'm not doing anything, like, why not, I have nothing else going on. So they ended up going to the zoo, and it was great, and it was created a springboard for more organic plans and hanging out afterwards and more texting and funny jokes and taking selfies next to the chimpanzees and things like that. And so finding things, we had another family in a similar situation, and they got tickets to an Oriole game and just sort of casually mentioned to their son, oh, we have an extra ticket, why don't you bring a friend? And the kid was kind of like hemming and hawing, and then last minute finally invited a friend, same thing. And so it's this idea of helping your child, your teen, find sort of a safe activity that takes the pressure off of making conversation, right? So at a baseball game, you're talking about the game, you're looking around at the crowds, the music, the everything else, same thing at the zoo, rather than just like invite a friend over. That's a lot of pressure of what are we going to do and things like that. And again, it's communicating of, are you okay? Are you being left out at school? Is there something I can do to help? Is there, having that open line of communication is really important. But the question that we got a lot also was, how do we know when it's more than just uncomfortable, right? It's okay to let our kids be uncomfortable. It's okay to let them struggle a little bit. That's how they're going to learn. When do we know when they've crossed over from a little bit uncomfortable and in a good phase to learn and figure it out themselves for independent thinking versus they need more help? And so what we know is teens, life in general, but the teen years in particular, are rampantly filled with stress. And so what's the difference between stress and anxiety? So stress we talk about more as a response to a trigger, a test coming up, going back into school for the first time in many months, being the new kid at a new school after a pandemic, things like that. Those are stressors. Having a fight with a friend, that's a stressor. And some stressors can be long-term. An example of a long-term stressor, a lot of the kids we work with who have some learning differences and are not getting the appropriate academic support. That's stressful. Day in and day out, you learn differently. You're going to school, but not being supported. Excuse me. And so those stressors certainly can have a physical and emotional impact. So what we see is kids with headaches and stomach aches and irritable. They're really quick to anger, difficulty sleeping. Anxiety, on the other hand, when it's requires maybe a little bit more support than stress, anxiety are the kinds of worries that aren't necessarily attached to a trigger, and they don't necessarily go away when a trigger goes away. So a child that maybe has performance anxiety gets really anxious before a test, but then they're still anxious after the test because they're already worrying about the next thing. And it's a more constant sort of a thing. The sort of physical and emotional symptoms of anxiety and stress are very similar. You're going to still see difficulty sleeping, headaches, stomach aches, irritability. The difference is, again, is that persistence with anxiety. And so both things, stress and anxiety, we can encourage our teens to do things like journal, learn deep breathing. There's the 4 square technique. There's the finger dip technique, easy Google kinds of things. Exercise, any physical activity is great for managing that distraction. Give them a break from whatever it is they're stressed about. And again, letting them talk, the communication piece. The difference here is that often when teens in particular, are stressed and anxious, they don't want us to fix it, right? It's really easy for us as parents to say, oh, you're worried about this big final. Let's pull out a calendar. Let's break it down. This night you're going to make flashcards. This night you're going to review 5 flashcards. This night, etc. That's not what they're looking for. That's just going to make them less likely to come to you the next time. What they want to hear is that you get it, you hear them, you see their concerns. And so reflecting back of, that sounds tense, that's really tough. Oh my gosh, that's insane that Mrs. Smith assigned such huge assignments this late in the year. So again, not trying to fix it, but making sure they feel understood. So when to get help, when to reach out to a licensed mental health professional. You see changes in eating or sleeping that persist longer than a week, maybe 10 days. And so eating a lot more or eating a lot less, sleeping a lot more or sleeping a lot less. Full-blown panic attacks. And this is where they can't catch their breath, their heart's racing. A lot of times, especially in earlier adolescence, but also sometimes in teens, we'll see panic attacks that end with vomiting. And once they throw up, they kind of oddly feel better. It's like they get it all out, literally. Avoidance of required activities and preferred activities. So if you had a kid that typically sort of went to school fine and is now saying, oh, my head hurts too bad, I didn't sleep, I really don't want to go to school today, can I please skip? Or you have a kid that loved to eat in a restaurant that you say, come on, we can go out, we can go eat outside, whatever. And they're saying, no, I'd rather stay home. That's a red flag. Unhealthy sort of self-soothing behaviors such as cutting, hair picking, skin picking, those are definitely red flags as well. And at the bottom line, parents have great instincts. And so if there's just something in your gut that things are not okay and you can't get your kid to open up, it's okay to say to your kid, something doesn't feel right. Do you want to talk to someone? Can you open up to me? That's okay. I think we get a lot of times parents saying, I'm afraid I'm going to put the idea in their mind. If I say to my son, you look really sad, I'm afraid he's going to say, what, you think I'm depressed? Now I'm sad. Or are you having bad thoughts? Well, what if that gives them the idea? And that's not going to give them the idea. It's going to give them a space to sort of talk about it. How am I on time? So real quick, I'm going to share a quick sort of personal story that I got permission from my son to share, because I think it does speak to sort of the listening to our parental instincts, understanding what these kids are going through, and also understanding that I have all the training and 25 years of mental health experience, and I sort of still got thrown for a loop with this one, in that my 18-year-old is like one of those kids that, I mean, he may have had like one tantrum as a toddler. He's just always been this like even Steven, happy-go-lucky, immature, goofy, funny guy. He's got anxiety, he's got ADHD, but never prone to like depression or withdrawing or anything like that. So, of course, like every other teen, he missed out on the end of his junior year. The beginning of his senior year was weird. He had no basketball season that he was looking forward to, waiting for college acceptances to come in, got denied from his first choice, got waitlisted at his second choice, had to sort of reevaluate everything. And he was bummed, understandably so, right? You have your first choice you thought you were going to go to since you were 8 years old, you don't get in, anyone's going to be bummed. The bummed sort of felt that there was like a radar that went off inside. Like it was almost uncomfortable to be in a room with him. He just emanated such sadness. He didn't want to eat dinner with us. He was sleeping much more. And he's 6'4" and with bad posture anyway. And so like the posture was even worse. You could just look at him and know he was hurting. And so I thought, oh, I'll give it another day. He'll pep up. And it just wasn't. So one night, he was about to slink back into his room and I was folding laundry. And I was like, hey, bud, come talk to me. And I just laid it out. And I was like, look, it's not even comfortable to be around you because it's so obvious you're hurting. What's going on? And it took a little bit of cajoling, but not that much. And he just sort of let it all out. And he knew that it was normal to feel yucky after being denied from something. But then the thoughts were what scared him. He started having thoughts of, will I ever be good enough? And is my life worth living? Like, what would happen if I took my own life? And thankfully, he didn't have a plan. His intent, he didn't want to do anything to himself. But the fact that he had those thoughts, he was like, I'm sick, Mom. I'm broken. Something's wrong with me. So we took a pause, and it took every ounce of strength in every cell that I had to not break down crying and just again, 6'4", wrap him in my arms and hold him and say, don't ever leave me. But to normalize it and to reflect, it's been a really, excuse my language, shitty 14 months. I get it, bud. And also, it's normal. The majority of teens at some point will at least once, and I think usually that the sort of norm is twice, have thoughts about what if I wasn't here anymore. Normal is not to have a plan. Normal is not to have an intent, but to have that sort of fleeting thought of like, this is just too hard. I'm not sure I can do it anymore. And as soon as he heard that, like, he's not broken, it's normal, there was just it was like a backpack of bricks that he just dropped. And the analogy that I made for him is, with our mental health, we have bumps, just like with our physical health. So this for you is like an upper respiratory infection, right? Like a bad cold. You need a little more TLC from Mom. You get your rest, drink your fluids, take your vitamins. That would be an upper respiratory infection. This is get your rest, get your TLC, we'll get you back on track. This is like a virus. It's no different and it's normal. If it happens again and it's worse or it's different or it comes back quickly, then we're gonna look at it as strep throat, right? We're gonna go to a doctor. We're gonna go to somebody else. Strep throat, I can't treat that at home. I need an antibiotic. So if this is happening again and the thoughts get more persistent, then we need more help. And maybe we need medicine. Maybe we need more therapy. That's okay. Just like having strep throat, it's no big deal. We call the doctor, you get swabbed, and you get help. And so with our mental health, what I really want to sort of impart for you guys to be able to talk to your teens, talk to your friends, talk to your community about is our mental health and our physical health really aren't that different. So I just gave examples of sort of more short-term mental health struggles that we can have and how we can make them analogous to different physical illnesses. We can do the same thing with long-term things. So again, he has ADHD. kids with learning differences, kids with depressive mood disorder. You can make an analogy to something like food allergies, celiac disease, asthma. Those things are going to be with those kids, teens, long term, but they're manageable. There's people that are trained to help them manage. A kid would never be embarrassed to say, I have asthma, I need my inhaler. So why should a kid ever be embarrassed to say, I'm really struggling, I need help? And so if that is like the big thing that I can leave you guys with tonight, talk to your teens, communicate with them, and let them know that it's okay to feel like this, it's normal to feel like this, and there are ways that we can get them through it. I'm tired of listening to myself. So maybe we can start to hit some questions in the chat. Drew, have you been filtering them? Do you want me to, what do we want to do?
So there was one question to start that was asking about, how do we help kids whose friendships have changed over being apart from those school friends for a year already?
Yeah, that's tricky. So again, it's like the personalities can change. And so you can go back to school and someone who was one of your closest friends now just seems different, or it was just time and separation have drifted apart. And so again, it's about communicating. It's about saying, hey, I noticed you haven't been hanging out with Drew as much. Is everything okay? And have that conversation. And maybe your teen says, it's just weird. I don't know how to reinitiate it. And then we can go back to that like zoo idea of, well, what if I took you guys for a manicure over the weekend or something like that? So it's not so much pressure. Or it may be, you know what, Drew's just not nice anymore. She doesn't even say hello. I don't know what I did. And so then we can sort of help them have that conversation of reaching out and saying, hey, did something happen? Like, we used to be cool. I'm not sure what's going on now. But again, it's that communication and figuring it out, because there could be 8,000 reasons for that divide other than time and just awkwardness.
Awesome. Thank you. So, I think another question that recently came in was, how do we encourage kids who have been, potentially self-isolating to really push themselves to maybe see those old friends? They're kind of worried still about COVID, but we want to help them to be in that place of seeing friends and moving forward.
Sure. It's going to depend on the kid's personality, I guess, and their reasons for their hesitation. There's a family, a teen that we work with right now, actually, who's struggling with this because she kind of felt like she missed the end of freshman year, went back sophomore year, and she's like, it's like they're 20 years old. A lot of these kids are just moving faster. They're hooking up, they're drinking, they're doing things that she's not yet comfortable with. And so we've been working with her on trying to identify one or two people from her classes to slowly reach out to. So she's working on an English paper right now. So to be able to reach out, so that's how we did it. We did it in sort of a benign way of just reaching out and saying like, hey, would you put in for your conclusion, I'm struggling with my conclusion, any ideas? And then it sort of started a natural conversation and reach out. And she sort of said like, would you mind looking at my paper tomorrow at lunch? And that's it. So finding, it's sort of like that, back to that zoo anchor example that I'm probably beating a dead horse about, but finding something that feels safe. And so for this particular client, this English paper felt safe. It felt like a safe way to sort of start to establish a connection.
Awesome. We have a few more coming in now. One says, for reintegration for a kid with sort of pre-existing anxiety. So maybe a teen who, already had some anxiety prior to the pandemic. Is it better to sort of try and do a gradual reintegration, part-time at school, or really throwing them back in the deep end, right? And sort of seeing if they can swim with that sort of full time,
Yep.
Where we go with that.
Yeah, and we've dealt with a couple younger sort of middle school age kids that we've dealt with this. And it's, again, I feel like I just live in the gray area tonight with these answers, but it depends. And so the best way really, truly the best way to address that is to ask your kid what they're more comfortable with and to try different things and see what's better. Sometimes my concern always with the gradual reentry is we're reinforcing the avoidance behavior. It's we know they're going to be anxious in school, and as soon as we pull them out, they're going to be more comfortable, and so we're reinforcing that pull away because it feels better. And so, sort of as a parent and as a professional, I tend, sorry, we live by a firehouse. My instinct is usually to push into the deep end and to say, I'm pushing you because I know you can do it. But let's, again, back to communication, let's talk about what you need to do this and feel good about it. Let's remember your deep breathing. Let's practice some relaxation exercises that you can do. There's stuff they can do with like tensing and relaxing the muscles in their feet and their legs that they can do at their desk that no one will know they're doing, that can help sort of soothe some of that anxiety when they're at school in person. Touching base with the guidance counselor and being, having them be available to say, if you're really feeling like you're not going to make it through the day, go touch base with Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so and sort of take that as a booster, but you've got this, and sort of instilling confidence and see what they need to be able to do that. And address what the concerns are. What are the thoughts? Are the thoughts, if I go to school, nobody's going to include me, I'm going to be made fun of? Or are the thoughts, if I go to school, I'm going to get COVID and bring it home to mom and dad? And so depending on what the scary thoughts are, whatever the teen is telling themselves, that's where we can address it from those thoughts.
Great, thank you. And I think, as kids are coming back in, I know this is something we at BBYO are paying attention to, how do we really create those safe environments, right? How do we make those kinds of professionals available to our teens? How do we have wellness specialists and nurses who can, respond to those needs? So I think it's important, on both ends to have that communication flowing and have those professionals available. So it's great.
Yep.
We have a couple of questions. One about, the kid who was happy being remote, not terribly social, and really is not looking forward to going back into those social situations. How do we maybe support that teen who did potentially, thrive might be the wrong word, but really did well in that environment?
So happy introverts are a thing. That's a thing. And I can't even, countless parents throughout the years, we get referrals saying, my kid's not socializing. My kid's really seems happy, curled up on the couch with a book or playing video games and whatnot. And again, it's communication and those parental instincts of knowing your kid. There are happy introverts. Now, having said that, I'm going to sort of contradict myself a little bit because social connection is healthy. Isolation is unhealthy. So if it's a kid who seems happy when they're reading their book and they're playing their video games, but also maybe once a month hangs out with friends, or when they're playing those video games, they have those ridiculous headphones and they're talking to friends while they're doing it. But they're going to school in person, they're participating in an extracurricular activity, and so they're socializing that way, that's fine. There's nothing unhealthy about that. And in fact, I'll go back to, I have like a personal and professional sort of high horse about extracurricular activities. And maybe I'm preaching to the choir here because all your kids are in BBYO, and so they are doing something outside of school. But whether it's being a part of a team, being in the choir, the chorus, or being in a theater production, being a part of something is a really critical part to adolescent teen healthy development. To feel a part of something, to feel like you're contributing to something, to learn to work and cooperate with others and accept different personalities and strengths and weaknesses is critical. So the fact that your kids are already involved in BBYO is a great sign for that. But if your kid loves something, whether it's tennis or swimming or theater, if you can find a safe outlet for that, I think that sort of answers that for a lot of these happy introverts.
Awesome. So we have two questions, Nicole, that are about that really tenuous parent-teen relationship. And, that for teens, right, that if it comes from our parents, sometimes they're not hearing it, right? So how do we potentially, one question is about, how do you help a teen who is automatically rejecting anything you suggest? And that includes potentially, helpful techniques without pushing them away.
Yeah.
And the other is really about convincing your child to actually use the tools that they may have learned, or that you're helping them to learn without them fighting against it because it's coming from you as the parent.
Yeah, that's tricky. That's really tricky. So the first thing is laying the foundation and going back almost to a reset. So going back to what I said earlier on about the reflective listening, if you can do some of that, of this is scary. Going to school in a mask all day is a pain. It's finals coming up, that's really hard. Navigating being back with friends and friends group changing. I remember that in 10th grade. It's not easy. I'm glad I don't have to go through it again. Just reflecting what they're going through and showing some empathy. I'm sorry you're struggling. Laying that foundation is really important. Using some of those analogies that I talked about with regard, like strep throat and upper respiratory, if your kid had a horrible cold and they came to you and they said, Mom, I can't sleep. I have so much snot. I can't even lay down. I can't breathe. You're going to say, here, take this Sudafed or whatever it is, take this vitamin C, and they're going to listen about that. And so if we can start to make those parallels of you don't feel good. Let me help you because you don't feel good. If we can start to normalize it in that way, it's a little bit easier. And sometimes it has to come from role modeling and we have to kind of fake it of, I'm really nervous for this talk I have to give for 346 parents from across the globe for BBYO tonight. I'm going to take a walk beforehand and read over my notes 27 times so I'm prepared. That's part of role modeling with my kids, of letting them, like, we all experience blips in our mental health and we all need support and help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to lift up something that Mimi put in the chat, which is, who is that safe adult? And that if it's not coming, if our teens aren't hearing it from us, who else could potentially fill that space? Is it an aunt, an uncle, a cousin? Is it a BBYO staff member, an advisor? Is there someone else that can help to fill that space that a teen might be more open to hearing from? So I think, Mimi, I just think that's such a great point and wanted to lift that up for everyone, because it doesn't always come to us. And we do, as parents, always want to have the answers. And yet sometimes I totally agree with what was put in the chat. Sometimes those answers aren't listened to because we're the parent. So Nicole, another question that came in, and something I know Lisa Damore wrote about recently, was how to help a child who may be self-soothing with food, either restricting, binge eating, that some of those, coping skills that our teens are reaching to right now might not be the healthiest coping skills. And how do we help them through that?
So if it's food, nobody's going to like my answer. The general rule is you keep your mouth shut unless they ask for help, because you will have that exact reverse that we were just talking about. If you say, you've already had quite a bit of ice cream, that's not so healthy, do you want me to cut up an apple for you? In their head, they're going to be saying, screw you, I'm going in for another pint. And so it's about having healthy options out and available. Cut up fruits, cut up vegetables, and just have them easy. But unless they say, I can't stop eating this junk food, I hate what I'm doing to myself, can you help me? When it comes to food, we have to, and also if they're way restricting and it's unhealthy, then obviously, but if it's a binge eating, if they're overeating, we can't say anything. As hard as that is, and it's heartbreaking to watch, and it's just feeding a vicious cycle, because then they feel horrible about themselves. And so with that also, in addition to sort of having healthy options and keeping your mouth shut, as hard as that is, and watching your face and not rolling your eyes and things like that, the other thing is sort of keeping them busy and finding other ways to build their confidence, because a lot of times that sort of binging, overeating is filling a void. And so trying to identify what that void could be. And so it goes back to what I said earlier, whether it's extracurricular activities, making plans, family plans with cousins maybe that are similar ages and other things like that, and just sort of trying to keep them busy and build their confidence and give compliments where you can. I see you studying so hard. I see how hard you're working. Those kinds of compliments go a long way.
Awesome. Thank you. And then another question, which I think goes back a little bit to some of what you were talking about before, how much freedom right now is appropriate for kids coming out of hibernation, right? If we give too much on the front end, it becomes, it gets out of hand very quickly, right? And can kind of take on a life of its own. How do we as parents, I think, navigate those really, as you were saying before, those tough decisions we had to break from in some ways during COVID, that now, like, how do we give that freedom? How much freedom? When do we, and how do you navigate that?
So I think it depends on the age. If we're talking about middle schoolers, I would say slow and steady and amp up, because middle schoolers are, I love them. I love that age, but they're incredibly awkward. And they missed a chunk of their social development. So probably a little bit slower. High schoolers definitely feel the push. And I've heard it from my own kids' friends. And I've heard it from my clients as well, is they feel like they got gypped, and so they're trying to make up for lost time. And so with the high schoolers, if you have established a good trust relationship with your kids, and they're going to go to a party and they're going to have a couple drinks, but they're not going to drive, and they're going to call you if they're not feeling comfortable, you kind of can't hold them back, because they need to sort of get it all out of their system. They have to make the mistakes now. I would much rather my kids make the mistakes now, when I can drive 10 minutes to go get them, or I'm a quick text away, versus when they're off at college and I really don't have my pulse on who's looking out for them and what's going on. So I think it depends. I would say in the younger kids, a slower, steady approach is probably better. And in the older kids, you have to let them sort of drive the ship. So obviously we talked about those happy introverts. We talked about the kids with anxiety. They are not flying out the door. The kids that are flying out the door, it's actually healthy for them to be flying out the door. And what we can do is make sure they're physically and emotionally safe by keeping those lines of communication open, reminding them to make good choices, and sort of letting them go. And sometimes they're going to fall on their face, but it's how they're going to learn and develop better decision-making practices down the road.
Awesome. And as we're talking about, decision making and getting back to sort of that in-person connection activity, what kind of advice do you have potentially for weaning kids off of their technology, thoughts about social media? Those are some of the questions that are just coming in a little bit.
Okay, so two separate answers, because social media is like, we could talk about that till tomorrow. The wean from the need for electronics is going to happen naturally. It's going, like I said, the social connection is self-reinforcing. The gaming piece of it, so the kids that are just like scrolling Instagram, Snapchat with their thumb, they're all going to have arthritis in their thumbs. They fly so quickly. That will naturally sort of decrease on its own as they get busier, as they're out and about more. The gaming, it's an addiction. It's these kids are, and I've got one downstairs right now, and I hear him yelling in the game. And when I tell him, like, get off the game and go see someone in person, this is social. He's got the dorky headset with the thing, and all hours of the night, and he's into it. And I've sort of waved the white flag and given up on fighting on the time. But again, he's a senior and he's done classes. So for the kids who have to do their homework and things like that, setting limits is important with the gaming. So your homework is done. I don't mean to sound like Leave It to Beaver, but maybe a chore or two, put your clean laundry away, walk the dog, something. There needs to be something before the gaming happens. You must sit down at dinner with us. You must do all your homework and show me that it's done, something before it's done, so that they can, again, we're trying to set them up to be independent, healthy decision makers down the road. And so if we just say no games Monday through Friday, they're never going to learn to regulate it on their own. So if they have a big test on Thursday, Wednesday night, if they rush through their studying to get to their game and then they don't do well on the test on Thursday, that's how they're going to learn that they need to start studying earlier and do the gaming a little bit less. Social media. Again, I'm going to beat a dead horse and talk about communicating with your kids. Social media is a highlight reel. So I'll say it again. Social media is a highlight reel. So my 16-year-old came to me and she's like, Mom, I finally see what you're saying, because I said it so many times, and showed me a picture of two girls who she knows for a fact all they do is badmouth each other. They are not good friends, but they happen to have both been on vacation at the same time, ran into each other and took a picture on the beach. And all the comments were, oh my God, you guys are beautiful. Look at you guys together. You're so lucky you got to go away together. They weren't away together. And it made their friends jealous that they didn't know they were together, and people felt like they were hiding something. No, that's not what happened. They ran into each other. They took a quick selfie. Oh my gosh, this is so weird. You're in the same place. I'm in the same place in Florida, whatever, and posted it. And so everybody wrote their own narrative about what was happening. And then each of their friend groups felt left out, that they weren't with them. And so having that conversation of, this is a highlight reel. It's great to look at for pictures of cute puppies and tell your friends that they're the most beautiful person in the world. But beyond that, that's all it is. It's fiction.
And going back to the gaming for just a moment, I know you talked a little bit about the sort of that self consequence, right? Of like them having to learn the hard way a little bit. Are there any other, we did get a question, any other consequences you would suggest if they don't do those things, or,
Yeah,
you know,
don't? Sure. Especially for middle school and even in ninth grade, pull the plug. You know, you didn't do well on this test because clearly you didn't study. You have one more chance to do better next time. The next time, if it's not any better, then we pull the plug and it's gone for the week and you can earn it back. Oh, say hi.
Hi.
Came to
real live teenager. What do you recommend for a teen who, you know, maybe has anxiety and absolutely refuses to see a professional about it?
Tricky. So I've had kids bribed to come see me. You go see Dr. Glick, you get $10. Go see Dr. Glick, we'll go get a Slurpee. Dr. Glick also keeps really cool prizes in her closet for that very reason. I think if you reach out to a professional and let that professional know what's going on and that you are struggling to, here's what's going on with your teen and you're struggling to get him or her in, they will usually have some more individualized suggestions for you once, you know, they can do a phone intake. I generally do a pretty lengthy phone intake and I'll get to know that kid's sort of general personality, what they like, what they hate, and sort of say like, okay, so here's how we can do this. I've met teens the first time and we in their neighborhood and gone for a walk and just said, you know, if anybody sees you with me, you just say that was my mom's friend. She was in visiting. They don't have to know what we're doing. You make it comfortable. It doesn't need to feel so clinical. We've had teens before their first session send an email about stuff they want the therapist to know about them, but they're embarrassed to say out loud. And that sort of serves as an icebreaker and for conversation later on. But don't be afraid to bribe a little bit, to say, let's just give it a chance. You'll go 5 times. And if you go 5 times with a good attitude and give it a chance, then we can, whatever that, Target gift card, Starbucks, whatever it is that sort of speaks to them. But again, going back to that analogy of if you had strep throat, we would have to go to the doctor and get help for it. It's not going to go away by itself. And that's where we are now. You know, you're hurting and I have a way to make you feel better. So let me try and make you feel better.
And while we're on that sort of vein of, you know, you're hurting and trying to help you feel better, and we just have time for a couple more questions, but, you know, one that just came in the chat was, you know, can you explain why a teen might self-harm and might engage in some of those self-harming behaviors? And I know we've seen an uptick in those controlling behaviors, self-harming, eating disorders, right? All of those various pieces because of the pandemic and that loss of control. But wondering if you can explain a little more of, you know, why a teen might Point self-harm.
Yeah, so from self-harm, separate from eating disorders and separate from suicidal ideation and depression, self-harm really is, there's a lot of emotional pain inside. And you'll hear teens when they're in treatment say, I need to get it out somehow, or the pain of the cut distracts me from the pain of what's inside and the thoughts of what's inside my head. They are 9 times out of 10, more than that, 10 times out of 10 within a couple of sessions of therapy, able to say, I know it's not helping. I know it's temporary. It only makes me feel better for a minute or two. And then I'm embarrassed that I did it. So then it makes it worse, but they don't know how to stop it. And so in therapy, we can learn the techniques for having the urge, stopping, and picking an alternative behavior for that. And so getting help for that's one of those things that just we can't do it at home as parents. We need to see them in the office and be able to tackle that head on. I think we've seen an uptick with the pandemic when social isolation was at its peak of the suicidal ideation, suicidal attempts were higher than I've ever seen. Reading about it nationally, professionally, in terms of the referrals that we were getting and in our social circle. And so that's been really, really scary. And I think there was a question earlier on as I was skimming them and then it went to the top, but I think it was related to what to do if your kid has a friend who's expressed suicidal thoughts or is really struggling, but the parents don't know. What do you do? And that is so tricky and that is so hard. But similarly to if the kid was at your house and had a fever, you would let the mom and dad know. And so being able to reach out to the parents and say, you know, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but if it was my kid, I would want to know. She said that she was having thoughts about hurting herself and she knows where the pills were from your knee surgery and that's how she would do it. So please make sure you throw those pills away and please get her help. It won't end a friendship. If anything, it'll solidify a friendship. It's really sending the message, I care about you, you're worthy, you're worth being cared about. And so as hard as that is, it's really important that kids speak up, that they know it's okay to speak up. Again, if their friend fell at school and twisted their ankle, broke their ankle, whatever, they would go get them help. This is no different. Your friend is hurting and we need to get them help.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to, first of all, thank you. I want to thank Mimi and Jenna, both who are really incredible members of this Wellness and Inclusion Council, who put this night together, and to Drew and Samantha, who are the professionals that we truly could not pull this off without. And of course to Nicole, but before I thank Nicole, I hope everybody who's on can take a moment to think about what keeps us all together here as BBYO. And so the fact that the BBYO staff, professionals, and parent body were able to tap into a need that the parent community was really starving for is a testament to how they always have their finger on the pulse of what our teens need and therefore what we need to support them. And so bringing in people like Rabbi Dana Sorokin and Nicole, who are experts in what they do and can give us the advice to help when we need it, but also the confidence to reach out when we need more. I will tell you the story Nicole just told about making that difficult phone call. I found myself in that position not so long ago and called Nicole and said, I don't know what to do. My daughter just shared something with me about another child. And she said, you're not going to like my answer, but you need to call those parents. And I will tell you, the end of the story is a good one because I did call those parents and that child got the help that they needed. And that child, there was no anger, there was no animosity, exactly what Nicole said. That child felt worthy. That child felt like somebody was cared about them and that child went to the right person because ultimately she was really looking for help and she just didn't know where to go. And so thank you all for being here tonight. Tonight is taped for anybody. I know we saw a couple of those in the chat. You know, in these crazy times, please find confidence in knowing that this is just the beginning of the discussions that we'll be having. The Wellness and Inclusion Council that is ongoing will continue to bring programming like this, both to parents and to teens. And if there is anything that you feel that you need more of, please feel free to reach out to Drew and let her know so we can be guided to provide you with what you need to help your teens or what your teens need to help to thrive. Because ultimately, that's really what we're all here for. So thank you all for a great night. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you, everybody else.
Night.